Hello and welcome to my presentation on the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, otherwise known by its acronym CEDAW. My research question is, does Cameroon's ratification of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women promote peace within the country? The purpose of this research is to determine whether the ratification of international legal frameworks effectively translate into domestic peace-building efforts, especially in the case of promoting the rights of women. My case study is Cameroon. Adopted by the UN General Assembly on 18 December 1979 and entering into force in 1981, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women is a landmark international treaty aimed at promoting gender equality. It was the result of over 3 decades of advocacy by the UN Commission on the Status of Women, which sought to expose and address systemic inequality faced by women globally. CEDAW establishes a comprehensive legal framework defining what constitutes discrimination against women, requiring state parties to eliminate such discrimination through legislation, policy, and social reform. Article 1 defines discrimination broadly, while Article 3 obliges states to ensure women's full development and rights on equal terms with men. The Convention addresses three major areas. The first is civil and legal equality, which guarantees women's rights to voting, nationality, education, employment, and legal capacity. It asserts women's equality in marriage, family relations, and property rights, challenging laws that bind a woman's identity to her husband's status. The second is reproductive rights. CEDAW uniquely emphasizes reproductive autonomy, recognizing maternity as a social function and calling for shared child-rearing responsibility. It supports access to family planning and integrates reproductive health into broader legal protections. And the last is cultural and social norms. It acknowledges the role of tradition and stereotypes in sustaining gender inequality. It mandates states to reform educational materials, customs, and societal norms that reinforce gender roles, pushing for a redefinition of the role of men and women in both public and private spheres. Now, before I proceed with this presentation, it is necessary to define some key terms. It is important to know the difference between a treaty and a convention. A treaty is a formal and binding agreement between two or more states or groups of states. Meanwhile, a convention is a type of treaty, usually drafted and adopted by international organizations such as the United Nations itself and the World Health Organization as examples. Woman. For the purpose of this presentation, and in the context of Cameroon, which is my case study, a woman will be any classical or biological female, irrespective of age. Discrimination against women. Article 1 of the CEDAW defines discrimination against women as, and I'm paraphrasing, any distinction, exclusion, or restriction made on the basis of sex, which impairs or nullifies the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise by women of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Here are the core provisions of CEDAW in summary. Article 1 defines discrimination against women. Article 2 mandates policy measures to eliminate discrimination. Article 3 ensures the full development and the advancement of women. Article 4 allows for temporary special measures to accelerate de facto equality. Article 5 calls for a modification of social and cultural patterns to eliminate prejudices. Article 6 addresses specific areas such as trafficking, political participation, education, employment, healthcare, and family life. Now, Articles 17 to 30 focus on the mechanisms for monitoring implementation and the administrative provisions of the convention. For example, we talk about the creation of committees, submitting regular reports as in other committees or conventions, procedures of signing, procedures of ratifying, and allowing state parties to make reservations. It also requires states to submit regular reports on the legislative, judicial, administrative, or otherwise measures they have adopted to give effect to the provisions of the convention. Now, for you to fully comprehend how gender dynamics have influenced both conflict and structural injustice in Cameroon, it is necessary to understand its colonial past, its dual legal systems, and the persistent struggle for social equity. For the record, Cameroon has about 250 ethnic groups. Yes, you heard me well. 250 ethnic groups. And as you would imagine, these ethnic groups have different cultures, and gender roles were diverse and shaped by local customs. While a few groups such as the Tika and the Kom people of the Northwest region had female institutions like the Queen Mother, otherwise known as the Women's Secret Society, that offered forms of social authority. Most of the ethnic groups of the rest of the country had men in position of authority. Cameroon, at different points in time, was colonized by different colonial powers. German colonization, which took place between 1884 and 1916, disrupted traditional gender balances by centralizing power through male chiefs. The subsequent Anglo-French partition introduced two legal traditions. The French introduced the French civil law in the East, now called the Francophone regions, which diminished women's rights by institutionalizing paternal authority. The British introduced the common law in the West, or Anglophone regions as it's called today, which upheld customary law, often maintained discriminatory practices, especially in marriage, property, and inheritance. Following independence in 1960, Cameroon adopted a centralized authoritarian political structure that sidelined women in public life, despite constituting a majority of the population. While the 1972 Constitution proclaimed gender equality, statutory reforms did not sufficiently override patriarchal customary norms. Women were vastly underrepresented in parliament, local government, and judicial systems. Cameroon signed the convention in 1983 and ratified it in 1994. This step laid a foundation for promoting peace within the nation, particularly by acknowledging the vital role of women in conflict resolution and peace building. Out of the 194 UN member states, a remarkable 187 have ratified the CEDAW. The United States is the only industrialized nation that has not ratified the convention, and it continues to stand apart financially, politically, and symbolically. The implementation of CEDAW has prompted several initiatives aimed at fostering peace through gender equality. There has been several legal reforms, policy reforms, and institutional changes in Cameroon. Note that I'm referring to changes that were made after 1994 when Cameroon ratified the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. I mentioned after 1994 because there were some steps taken by the Cameroon government to promote equality between men and women, even though most of it was on paper. For example, the preamble of the Constitution mentioned that all persons are equal, even though that was not quite a reality. Now, concerning legal reforms, there has been a draft bill on the punishment and prevention of gender-based violence, though that bill is still pending adoption. There is also a draft comprehensive family code reform aiming to harmonize personal status laws. However, that code is currently inconsistent due to coexisting customary, Islamic, and civil law. For example, marriage is defined by the Cameroon customary law as, and I quote, a union between one man and one or more women to the exclusion of all other men. Meanwhile, the Islamic law still permits a man to marry up to 4 wives and does not specify a fixed age for marriage. There's also been a case law advancement in Cameroon. A good example is a Supreme Court's judgment in Zamcho Florence Lum versus Chibukom Peter Fru, which affirmed the woman's right to inherit property, declaring customs denying such rights as repugnant to natural justice. On policy reforms, there is the introduction of gender-focused frameworks such as the Poverty Reduction Strategy Paper, that's the PRSP, and the sectoral gender policy within ministries. The government has also established gender desks in public institutions to integrate gender perspectives into planning. On education, there is the implementation of girls-friendly schools initiative and the allocation of 40% of scholarships to girls in certain sectors to promote gender balance in education. Meanwhile, in politics, the government has introduced gender quotas in the parliament and the Senate. Efforts have been made to institutionalize quotas for legislative bodies, cabinet roles, and diplomatic posts. For example, the ruling CPDM party has at least one female candidate for every 3 contesting seats. As a matter of fact, where I come from personally, the mayor is a woman and the member of parliament is a woman as well. The implementation of CEDAW is also felt in Cameroon at the level of institutional changes. The government has created key ministries and agencies. For example, the establishment of the Ministry for the Promotion of Women and the Family, the MINPROF, and the formation of women's empowerment centers across regions to support grassroots training and advocacy. It is worth noting that these agencies or ministries are headed by women and mostly managed by women. Additionally, there is increased female representation, though still very low. Some women have been appointed as sub-prefects. Those are heads of communes or districts. Some of them are appointed members of parliament and, or rather, say elected, and judges. So, though full parity remains distant. Lastly, there is a significant increase in the support for women civil society organization. The Cameroon government is actively collaborating with organizations like the FIDA Cameroon, which is an international federation of women lawyers, and other associated organizations like the French version of that FIDA. There are also other associations to monitor and advance gender equity efforts in the country. Now, before I talk about the impact of the implementation of CEDAW on peace in Cameroon, I would like us to find out if gender equality promotes peace. Here are two quotes that provide an answer to the question. At least I found them very interesting. The first one is from John Galton, which says, I quote, "Peace is not just the absence of war, but the presence of justice." Another important quote is from the former United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan. That states, and I quote, "There is no tool for development more effective than the empowerment of women." Now that we know that gender equality promotes peace, we should dive into the case of Cameroon, which we see the implementation of CEDAW promotes peace by fostering structural equity, reducing gender-based injustices, and enabling inclusive development. When women are empowered and their rights protected, the social fabric is strengthened, conflict is mitigated, and communities are better equipped to resolve disputes non-violently. CEDAW obliges Cameroon to eliminate discriminatory laws and customs. By doing so, it addresses long-standing grievances that often serve as root causes of conflict. Remember the enactment of the Family Code and the famous case law. We already know that peace thrives in inclusive societies. CEDAW encourages increased political participation of women, ensuring their perspective influence peace building, conflict prevention, and local governance. Efforts to implement quotas for women's representation in public office help shift political discourse towards equity and reconciliation. Also, violence against women destabilizes households and communities. Cameroon is ranked 13th out of 19 African countries with the highest divorce rate. That is partially because women have been educated on their rights, and the courts now recognize gender equality, unlike before where the women had no recourse, no one to run to, and they had to succumb or stay in a violent relationship. Moreover, CEDAW promotes equality in education, empowerment, employment, and healthcare by improving women's access to resources and economic opportunities. The convention reduces poverty, a major driver of unrest. Programs that empower rural women economically, for example, credit access, agricultural support, all these help stabilize vulnerable regions and promote community resilience. Lastly, CEDAW challenges harmful stereotypes and promotes shared responsibilities within families. Now, these shifts reduce domestic tensions, enhance cooperation, and build peaceful interpersonal relationships that echo throughout society. Education campaigns also foster a cultural transformation that support dialogue over dominance and respect over repression. In conclusion, it will not be an overstatement to state that the implementation of CEDAW in Cameroon promotes sustainable peace by transforming historically rooted gender inequalities in the country, shaped by colonial legacies and post-independence structures into equitable systems that empower women. In a nation where conflict has intensified female vulnerabilities, CEDAW affirms women's rights and institutionalizes their critical roles in peace building. True peace lies not just in silencing conflict, but in ensuring justice and inclusion for all, making women's empowerment a cornerstone of national harmony. Though there is much to be done, the current efforts are worth appreciating. This is the end of my presentation. Thanks for watching.